says that statement. Competition except where prohibited by law. The second extra credit question is from Israel Kersner, and the title is called Advertising. Now, draw a line in your notes, because everything from this point forward is on the final. We've covered everything through the test we're going to take on next Wednesday. Everything from Monday's lecture backwards is on test 3. Everything from today is for the final. Okay? No, did I say that? I'm sorry. This is on test 3. So scratch it out. This is all test 3. Today and Monday is on test 3. I'll tell you where to draw the line on that.
So everything that we're learning today and Monday, I guess is still going to be on.
Okay, so this is still on the test. This is test 3.
Yeah.
We're now shifting gears. We've gone from the economics of information to now we're going to look at the economics of income determination. This is called the Who Gets What lecture. Often called, this is the economics of income distribution. You'll hear people talk that way. But income is never distributed. Income is always determined and its source of creation. We're going to isolate causal variables here. It's not as if we create all the income and then have someone hand it all out. You get your income based on your creation of that income at its source point. Now, to figure this out, to isolate these effects, there are 3 broad categories in the economics of income determination. And these were really kind of classical school kind of definitions and categories, but yet we still use them because this is generally what we're looking at. There are entrepreneurs that earn profits and losses as income. There are workers on the labor market that receive real wages. And then there are savers or investors, you might say, that earn real interest rates. And there's causal variables that are in each of these. And we're going to go through this. Today we're going to do profits and losses and then get into workers and wages today. And then we'll finish up this on Monday. With entrepreneurs, they seek profits, they maximize profits, and try to avoid losses of income. And there's different concepts of profits. There's what's called accounting profits and losses versus economic profits and losses. And they're different. You have to know this. What makes them different? Now, accounting returns are what are called normal profits, or what are called permanent profits, or equilibrium profits, which is different from economic profits that firms are trying to maximize. And those are called abnormal profits. These are transitional, they get dissipated with entry and exit. These are called disequilibrium profits and losses. Now, to understand this difference, I'm going to give you, and you need to write this down, accounting profits and losses. Accounting profits and losses do not factor into account. Do not factor into account the opportunity cost of the owner's capital. Accounting profits and losses do not factor into account the opportunity cost of the owner's capital. Economic profits and losses do factor into account. That's the difference. Accounting profits and losses do not factor into account the opportunity cost of the owner's capital. Economic profits and losses do factor into account that opportunity cost. Now, So everything is driven by economic profits and losses. Everything is driven. All decisions are made by economic profits and losses. Never accounting profits and losses. No decisions are made on accounting profits and losses. Everything is done on economic profits and losses. And I'm going to give you some examples of this. But what you need to understand is that when we look at those profits and losses, right, and we're looking at opportunity cost for economic profit. Accounting returns, accounting profits and losses, are the minimum amount required to keep your investment in that industry. It's the minimum amount required to keep you in the industry. Why it's called normal profits or permanent profits, or equilibrium returns. Economic profits are different from that, either more or less. Now, to understand this first category, this is usually what I always say, the aha moment of the course. This is when the epiphany should start happening. If you're going to understand the example I'm going to give you, the rest of the course becomes easy. If you don't understand this and this doesn't connect the dots, then you're kind of in trouble. So let's work this thing through. To show you the difference between accounting and economic returns, we're going to put a whole bunch of pieces together right now. Let's say, for the sake of argument, there are 3 industries in an economy. Apple industry, milk industry, shoe industry. 3 markets, 3 industries, can't get simpler than this. And we're looking at rates of return on our investments as entrepreneurs. And let's say, for the sake of argument, the rate of return, dollar for dollar invested in apple orchards, can get you 10% rate of return. The rate of return on investing in the milk industry can get you 10% rate of return. If you invest in a shoe factory, you get 10% rate of return. What do you notice about those rates of return? It's all the same. Yeah. So these are accounting profits, right? These are accounting returns, which in no way affect any of our decisions. Economic profits and losses govern our decision making. Now remember, these don't include the opportunity cost. The entrepreneur will factor that in when he looks at different rates of return. So let's say you invest $1,000 in the apple orchard industry. And at the end of the year, your accountant comes and says, on your $1,000, you made $100 profits. Good news. Are you going to jump up and down and get all giddy and excited? No, because you didn't make a profit, did you? What's the opportunity cost of putting your money in the apple industry? Where could you put your money? You could have put it in the other industries. You could put it in the milk industry, shoe industry. Yeah, see, and so now we're going to see economic profits emerge. See, when all rates of return have been equalized, it's called a general equilibrium. You'll see that in just a second. Now let's say tonight the Surgeon General gets on TV. It says, drinking milk cures cancer. It's going to hit the milk industry. Now, are those rates of return going to stay the same? No, they're going to change. So let's say tomorrow the rate of return in the milk industry is going to go up, isn't it? Now, why is that? Because consumers are going to drink more milk. They're going to shift their preferences out of what? Apples, shoes, to buy more milk. So for those existing firms in the market, if you're a milk producer, you're a happy camper, right? Your product is going to have an increased demand here. You're going to be able to get a higher price. You're going to earn a higher rate of return. Does that make sense? The question is, how much economic profits are there now in that system? How many say 12? How many say 10? How many say 2? There's the epiphany. So right here. 2. 2 is the answer. 2 is like a magnet. like a magnet, going to lure investment. Now, why will it lure investment? Aren't investors greedy, greedy, greedy? Don't they want the highest rate of return after you adjust for risk and other variables? Yeah. So now what's going to happen is, because the demand for milk goes up, the price of milk goes up, the revenues of the milk producers go up, they're going to earn this extra 2%. See, that's an abnormality, isn't it? That's an abnormal amount, which will then be transitional because of exit and entry. And then it'll be dissipated. So it's no longer an equilibrium rate of return, it's a disequilibrium. It's a short run disturbance. Remember, differences cause movement. Write that down. The movement eliminates the differences. Now watch. So if you're in the apple orchard industry and your accountant's telling you you're earning 10 cents on every dollar you invest, and you look over at the milk industry and you say, wow, those guys are earning 12 cents on the dollar for every dollar they have in that industry, what will a greedy apple orchard owner person on the margin do? Sell his assets, take the money, and do what? Enter the milk industry. What will the greedy investor in the shoe company only earning 10% rate of return on the margin? What's he going to do? Sell his part and then invest that into the milk industry. Exit, entry. So far, so good? Now let's tie a few more pieces together. We know that if the demand for drinking milk goes up because it cures disease, we also know the principle of what? Derived demand. And remember, that's the demand for the output sets the demand for the inputs that go into the output. Remember Menger? Chapter 1 and 3? There it is. So now, how would you get into the milk industry? If you took your money out of the apple orchard industry, you'd have to buy what? Pasture land, buy cows, buy milking machines, buy all the things that you do to produce milk with. Are you with me? So the demand for all the inputs that go into making a dairy farm start to rise, doesn't it? What's going to happen to the price of the inputs in the dairy industry? Pasture land, milking machines, cows, hay, all that stuff. What's going to happen to their prices? Start to rise. So as you enter into that industry, you see your kind of cost rising. Derived demand. When your costs start rising, ceteris paribus, all other things equal, what's happening to that margin? It's going to start shrinking, isn't it? Eating into that 2% difference. Now, so these guys are going to start bidding for these specialized factors in the milk industry. That's going to start eroding some of that 2%. And once they actually have opened up a dairy farm and made all these short-run transitions, they've got cows, they're supplying milk to the market. What just happened to the number of suppliers in the milk industry? There's more sellers out there selling what? Additional milk. Which way does the supply curve of milk then shift? Shifts to the right. What's that do to the relative price of milk? Tend to bring it down a little bit. And when that price goes down, ceteris paribus, it's going to start shrinking some of that 2% difference. So your price is going to start to fall a little bit as your costs are rising simultaneously. Eventually, what's going to happen? That 2% is wiped out, isn't it? Now, so when does this process of exit and entry stop? When everything is equalized again. Same rates of return. You have the general equilibrium. So here we go. I'm going to just round this off. Maybe 11%. Now notice what's going to happen here. This example, right? See, once that happens, once your cost starts to rise, your revenue starts to fall a little bit, and now you're squeezing that 2%. Now if you're still in the apple industry, some of your competitors just left the apple market to go open a dairy farm. There's fewer sellers out here. The supply curve of apples has shifted backwards. The price is rising. Profitability is rising. Supply curve of shoe producers has shifted to the left. Price of shoes is starting to rise a little bit, starting to get you more revenues until this process is what equalized. Once it's equalized, all markets have the same rate of return. Is there any more entry and exit? How many understood what we just went through? That's Epiphany. The rest of the class should be easy. This is it. This was the grand culmination, right? From all that technical stuff up to this point. Okay, so you have an equilibrium. Just walk you through it. Something changes in the world. Now you have something abnormal. Those rates of return are going to be transitional. They're not going to last for long. As people exit other industries and enter that industry. So this is just a disequilibrium right here. What's luring capital to that milk industry is that little higher rate of return. It's those little differences that's driving the system. That's what entrepreneurs are trying to maximize. Those little differences. Make you fabulously wealthy, or can make you bankrupt very quickly. Little differences, right? See, so now what's the opportunity cost of staying in the apple industry? Well, it's none, right? Because you don't have the economic profits here, because the opportunity cost is 11 for your alternatives. Just like the opportunity cost here was, let's say, 10 for your alternatives. And so all decision making is based on economic profits and losses. All decision making. Nothing else. That's what's governing the whole system. Now, let's take this a few more steps here. These profits and losses here. When you think about those differences causing movement, see the consumers, let's put this all back one more time. The consumers, given this information, drinking milk cures cancer, are signaling to the producers, we need more milk. That price is a signal to the sellers of shoes, don't make as many shoes. Start making milk. Move the capital. You're telling the apple people, don't make as many apples. Take some of those scarce factors and start making milk, right? So those profits, economic profits, are a signaling mechanism. It's how the consumer is talking to those producers on that capital market, saying, here's where I need you to invest because we need more of this, because our needs are now more in towards milk. Okay, good. Now, then the question becomes this. How do you make an economic profit? Remember, see, economic profits factor into account opportunity costs. See, the opportunity cost of putting your money in the apple industry when you can earn 12 in the milk industry is you lost 2%. That's why they're going to exit and enter. But the exit and entry dissipates the profit or the loss to equalize rates of return. Now, when you think about earning an economic profit, you have to ask yourself, how do you earn an economic profit? Right? See, notice economic profits and losses take all of the costs into account, including the opportunity cost of the investor's capital. See, they're going to look around and say, what am I getting dollar for dollar? How does that compare dollar for dollar anywhere else I can put my money? And they're going to go for the highest rate of return after you've adjusted for risk and other variables. Okay, so then how do you do this? How do you make an economic profit? So this is an interesting question. When you look at profits in business, right? When you're making an economic profit, fundamentally what's happening is this. What you are producing for the needs of the consumer, they value on their own terms, subjectively, greater than the value of the factors of production foregone that could have been used to serve their needs in other ways. So when you make that 2% economic profit, the consumer is saying, look, I want that milk more than I want you to be making apples or shoes. Start making milk because my needs have now shifted to milk. So when you make an economic profit, the value they're attaching to what you're giving them is greater than the value foregone that you could have used to produce other things to serve their needs. In other words, profits are the growth of value. Write that down. Economic profits are the growth of value. That's how economies grow. They can only grow by economic profits. Now, losses are just the opposite. If you think about profit and loss accounting, with the loss, what's happening? You're taking scarce factors of production that have greater needs, as appraised by the consumers, in alternative uses. And then you're producing something they need less. So you say, I take scarce factors of production that have greater value to be used somewhere else, but I'm not doing that, I'm going to do this. You're actually taking a loss, aren't you? When a business, and what the consumers give you is less than what it costs you to do it, all costs included, then you take an economic loss. So if I decide to make lead tennis balls, and I take scarce labor, scarce capital, scarce lead, and I combine it and take all that value to make something nobody values, aren't I destroying value? Aren't I making everybody else poor? Yeah, because that lead, that labor, that capital could have all been doing what? Making other things that might serve their needs at a higher level if I just want to make lead tennis balls. So when you think about making an economic profit, this is really the story. This is what entrepreneurs are chasing, trying to maximize this. And how do they do that? By minimizing their costs and trying to get those costs down. And trying to serve the consumer on the consumer's own terms and their own needs. Profits are like the carrot that dangles in front of you. It's a carrot that makes the horse run. Losses are like a stick. Beat you over the head when you do something wrong. Losses are the shut-off mechanism. So if I'm making lead tennis balls, I'm going to be going bankrupt. Because the consumer gets pissed off, don't they? They say, my needs would have been better served if you weren't making lead tennis balls. Stop doing it. Well, how are you going to get me to stop doing it? Just don't buy my lead tennis balls. And I go bankrupt. And then what happens to all my factors of production? Workers go to work somewhere else. The money goes invested somewhere else. All the factors of production go somewhere else to serve your needs you value more. So the price system through the profit loss system is a signaling mechanism. And it's telling the producers how to best serve the needs of the consumer. If the consumers want more Frisbees and less hula hoops, the demand for Frisbees goes up, the demand for hula hoops go down. Now you get price differentials, rate of return differentials, capital, labor, everything moves to equilibrate that market. That's how they talk to the sellers. They say, this is what I'm telling you where my needs are. So then you start thinking about, okay, how do you make that temporary abnormality? Given that other people are greedy, they're going to rush in and try and capture some of that. Well, usually in business, you invest in what? New technology. So when you can come up with new ideas to become more efficient, assembly lines, all kinds of things that we've done, right? Mass produce things, find more efficient ways to produce things, find more comparative advantages that allow more productivity. And notice when you do this, and you're earning that abnormality, guess what everyone else is going to try and do? They're going to copy the same thing. So when Henry Ford used the assembly line, guess what every other auto company had to do? They use the assembly line, right? Because the consumer is saying, you're going to produce these things for me efficiently, or I'll put you in bankruptcy. Are you with me? Yeah. So you start to look at this and you say, so profits are an actual reward for efficiency, for productivity, for turning negatives into positives, for producing things more effectively, to serve other people on their own terms as they appraise those goods. So profits are the condition for economic growth. That's what all economic growth in every economy comes from profits. Guess what losses do to an economy? When you take scarce factors at high value and destroy them by making something nobody values, you're making everybody poor. And of course, if you do that, the consumers will take that stick and hit you right across the head and say, stop doing this. Stop doing this. This is not what we want. It gives us what we want. Now, so competition is that process that transmits this information through the price system. And the consumers are talking to the producers, coordinating. This is a massive coordination system. This is how pencils get made when no one knows how to make them. This is fundamental to everything. This is how the system gets coordinated. And it's a reward for your efficiency. It's a reward for your new technology and production. It's a reward for your new products. We talked about this a little bit in the last lecture. On any given day, there are thousands of new products that reach the market. And we also know thousands are going off the market because nobody's buying those. And there's enormous risk attached. Entrepreneurs take risks for potential economic profits, rates of return. And so that's the carrot dangling. Say, if you serve me on my terms, I will make you fabulously rich. Because when you trade with millions and then billions of people, on those pennies you become fabulously wealthy. More than kings and queens ever could have been in ancient times. If you can figure out how to serve people on their own terms, if you can invest in the right products when all your competitors are trying to do the same thing, right? The best one usually will win that in a competitive free market. That's why competition is so important. Because the benefits of the new technology, the benefits of the new product is spread to the consumers in lower prices, higher quality, and so forth. What does that mean? It means the standard of living goes up. Now also when you're making profits, what else are you going to be doing? You're going to be expanding, aren't you? And when your company expands, you usually hire more factors of production, which means you're going to hire more workers, which will push wages up, create more jobs, more opportunities, and so forth. So the ripple effects are tremendous. Companies that are going bankrupt are shutting down. So here's the Stacey rule of economics. Profits are economic growth. Losses is a contraction. So it's a loss to the economy. There is no opportunity in loss. All opportunity is in growth. There's no opportunity in loss unless the opportunity is turned it into a profit somehow. All opportunities from growth. So I always like to ask people, how many of you would like to go to work for a company that is ready to go into bankruptcy, to shut down? You say, I wouldn't be working there very long. There's no opportunity, there's no future in loss. That's the shut-off mechanism. It's all in growth. And so, when you think about this for a moment, you suddenly realize profits are a reward for service, for efficiency, for productivity, for helping others actualize their productivity and comparative advantage. That's how you make profits. You tap their skill, their talent. When they actualize in your firm, you actualize actual profits. They get shared between you, your employees, consumers, all across the board. So you start looking at it and you say, wow, entrepreneurs take risks. I know a lot of people think, oh, you just go into business, start counting money, and get rich. How many have ever known anybody who has a small business? Family member, relative? They worry about the business, don't they? You know why they worry about that business? Because that's their livelihood. And they know there's 1,000 other people that want that money too. That could maybe be better than them. More efficient. More productive. And you never know, because the consumer may just say, I don't like what you got, I like what they got. So you're always worried, you're always stressed. Right? My dad used to tell me, he says, son, when you go into business, you got to make sure the business doesn't own you. He said, because it'll always own you. You don't own it. It owns you because you're going to always obsess about it. Because that's your life. My father was right. He said, the key test in being a business owner is how to balance that with the rest of your life. That you don't become so obsessed with it that you miss out on your kids and your family and so other things you value. Now, so profits are simple growth. I always like to say they're also a moral badge of honor. That normatively, they're moral and good, and here's why. If you earn economic profits on a competitive free market, and notice my language, I'm very careful with these words. I didn't say if you earn it using monopoly. I didn't say earn it by fraud and things like that, because then you really didn't earn it. If you earn it by being more productive, more efficient, serving people better than any other person wanting to serve them can serve them, you've served the world. And they will serve you. And you will have fabulous profits. The richest people in the world that earned it traded with massive volumes of people. You think about it, right? The founder of McDonald's didn't become a billionaire by selling gourmet hamburgers to rich people. They sold average hamburgers to ordinary people very efficiently. When you look at Sam Walton, he didn't retail luxury goods to idle elites that are rich. He mass sold goods very discounted to the masses, made billions of transactions, and on those pennies became the richest man in the world. You look at Henry Ford, he didn't sell Rolls Royces to the idle elites. He sold Model Ts to the average person and lowered that price. See, by that technology just tremendously changed the world. When Thomas Edison comes with that light bulb, he's transforming life on this planet in a fundamental way. He's serving other people's needs, and they will serve him. That's why all these people become fabulously rich. You serve your fellow human being on a competitive free market. You don't use fraud, you don't use monopoly, you don't use some government privilege with tariffs or any of that crap. You just go out there and you earn it. People are going to serve you, and you'll become fabulously rich. Now, a few more points on this. So I've always said that I hear people that condemn profits. And the first question I ask them is, are you talking economic profits or accounting profits? And almost always they'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I look at them, I say, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. Obviously. Because that's the first distinction you have to make. And then secondly, I always remind them, I say, look, how do you earn a profit? If you think it's that easy, go in there in a business, open a business, and then watch how hot the competition gets. Right? You come up with a new product, purple polka dot burritos, and everyone lines up for purple polka dot burritos. Around the corner, every store in that town, every restaurant will be selling purple polka dot burritos. Every gas station will have purple polka dot burritos for sale. Because they're going to horn in on that differential. They're going to want that action. And now you realize the point, right? That it's not just that easy. Entrepreneurs take risks, and they do the risk for the reward. Rockefeller took enormous risks and became the richest man in the world by lowering prices, expanding output, coming up with 300 different sellable products off of garbage. That's how you get rich. You serve millions of people every day, and millions of people on their pennies make you the richest people in the world. You deserve it. So one of those things I always say is I always hear people feel guilty about the profits they make. And the first thing I usually tell them is, you're talking about economic profits or accounting profits, just to show them they don't know what they're talking about. And I always say, look, why would you feel guilty if you've earned it serving your fellow human being? And one of the most distressing things I have seen, 30 years as a professor of economics, having been in business for 7.5 years, every year I see more and more young students that feel that somehow profits are wrong, something to be ashamed of. Well, if profits are wrong and something to be ashamed of, are losses good? Is bankruptcy good? Is laying off your employees good? Is wasting scarce resources good? Is destroying other people's values good? There is nothing to ever be ashamed or feel guilty about honest, achieved success in life. Nothing. See, because there's profits in everything in your life, isn't there? See, there's financial profits in business. We know what that is. But think about the profits and losses of other things. How about relationships? Right? When you have a successful relationship with a friend or a significant other, and it's successful, and you're serving each other's needs and values, and it's a sustained, buildable relationship, that's something good. That's called emotional profits. What's emotional losses? You break it up. Things that destroy successful relationships are losses. Is there anything good about that? No. No. How about academic profits? When you study, you're investing, aren't you? Just like when you're in a relationship, you're investing your heart and emotions. But when you study, you're investing your time and effort to figure out how to learn this stuff and get a good grade. Now, if you're successful and you figure out how to efficiently crack the code, so to speak, how to take the notes correctly, how to study off those notes correctly, how to correct your mistakes on your exams efficiently, how to take your tests efficiently, right? You figure that out, and then you say, wow, I did good on this test. This is great. My grades went up. You don't need to feel guilty. You should be proud of that. You said, I've invested wisely. I figured out how to learn efficiently. Right? If you succeed in this class with an A does not mean someone must fail. I don't curve. I don't believe in that crap. I think everything is merit. You get what you deserve because you've earned it. And if you invest wisely and smart, you come for help because you need my comparative advantage to help you, I'll help you. And if you figure out, you say, now I got it. Now I'm learning this stuff. Now I'm not beating my head against a wall, 20 hours a day studying for something that I'm not learning. Now I'm getting it. You should be proud of that. You now make academic profits. You shouldn't feel guilty that someone else is failing, that doesn't try or doesn't come for help or doesn't figure that out. Maybe if you care about this other person, you might say, let me teach you how to do this. Maybe I can tell you what you're doing wrong with your notes, with the book, the syllabus. You're not reading the readings. You're not doing it. I'm helping you out here. If you care about your fellow human being, help them out. Serve them in other ways. Teach them. So you never want to feel guilty about your honest achievements in this life. Because there's nothing wrong with success. Just like there's no virtue in loss. There's nothing necessarily good about that. There's nothing good about screwing up. People make mistakes. Just like entrepreneurs invest and sometimes go broke. It doesn't mean they meant to go broke. Humans make mistakes. And the first thing you have to learn is how to learn from your mistakes. And that's true in everything in your life. Whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's your business, whether it's your study habits, you gotta figure out your mistakes. So in the future you don't make them again. And then success can be in your future. See, there's no success in loss. It's easy to take a loss. What's hard is to actually be a success. That's difficult. Because every other greedy guy is right there trying to do exactly what you're trying to do. And they could be better. They could be more efficient. Could be more productive. Could be. You need to learn. Learn what you do well. Learn what they do well. Maximize your efficiency. Study effectively. Figure out how you have successful relationships that last. One last point on this. When you think about this economic profits versus accounting profits, one last thing on this. How many have heard people on TV or politics will say, this company earned record profits last year of $5 billion. How many have heard this like on TV and stuff like that? You realize when they say that, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because you can make no inference unless you know whether this is economic profits and losses or accounting profits and losses. Let me give you an example. Say you have ABC Corporation. And let's say, for the sake of argument, the investor equity, what capital went into that company, is $1 billion of capital investment. Now let's say over here is their profits. And let's say, for the sake of argument, they make $100 million profits. What's the return on investment? What is it? No, they made it. 100 million profits. It's 10% rate of return. It's a rate of return. 10%. Are you with me so far? Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, in year 2, a whole bunch of people invest in ABC. Now they got more capital accumulation, expand the company. And let's say they now have $5 billion. It's a much bigger company. Are you with me? Now let's say they make $250 million in profits. Now if someone said, well, this is a record profit, see, because 250 million is more than 100 million. Is any decisions going to be made on that? No decisions are made on accounting returns. See, while this is a record accounting profit, what else is this? A record investment. You have to make the adjustments, don't you? So what's the rate of return on investment now? 5%, right? So can the rate of return on investment go down while you're earning record economic profits? Yes, it depends on what was invested to yield that. So the next time you hear someone go, that's record profits of that big company, you need to say, what's the capital investment in that company? What's the investor equity in that company? And they're going to give you that stare, the stupid look, like I don't know what you're talking about. And then you have to hit them again, say, you don't know what I'm talking about. All decisions are made on rate of return on investor equity, this column. It's not made on this. You have to make that adjustment. And then you'll figure out what's my rate of return dollar for dollar in this industry, and how does that compare to every other place I can put my money? And if the rate of return in the regular economy is, let's say, 7%, what are you going to be doing to your investment in ABC? You'll be pulling it out. You're going to be shutting that company down and moving that money somewhere else. See, that's when the entrepreneur expenses out the opportunity cost. They look at what the other alternatives are and say the opportunity cost of me keeping here at 5%, when I get 7% over there, I'm moving it from here to there. That's not irrational, that's perfectly rational. It's exactly what you'd expect. So whenever people do this, they'll say, well, this is a record number, it's a big number. You say, yeah, that's a bigger number. Yeah, the investment went up greater than the rate of return, that's why the real rate of return went down. See, and you've all heard this. You've all seen this on TV, you've heard politicians play to envy. They played to this hatred of success. And they'll say, well, that company's making record profits. They should be giving higher wages and all. No, actually, they're going to be going bankrupt if they keep doing this. Rate of return's going down. What if they put another $5 billion in and it's 250? That's 2.5%, right? It keeps going down, doesn't it? Yeah. If you see, it's never a question of what do I get. It's what I put in. And what do I get for what I put in? Then how does that compare to every other possible investment? And that's where the entrepreneur makes that decision. They look at what they're getting, where they're at, they look around, and they say, there's better over there. I'm moving over there. And that process will continue until rates of return have become equalized, ceteris paribus. Nothing else changes, right? But everything is always in dynamic flux, so it'll keep changing, and the capital keeps moving. So hint, 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 you may have a question like something like this. Something, can you calculate that out? Can you do this, the math? Right? You say, what's my rate of return? If I give you a rate of return and I give you the profits, you should be able to tell me the investor equity, vice versa. You should be able to calculate that out. It'll be simple, you won't need a calculator. Okay, that's profits and losses. Profits are good. Unambiguously, if you earn it on a competitive free market, absent force or fraud. Now we're going to get to the second piece of today. Here we go. We're going to look at the second part of income determination, and that's workers and real wages. Now, remember when I went through minimum wage rate? And I told you wages are determined by productivity. So this is the determining factor. It's called value marginal productivity. Now remember, the real wage is the monetary part, right? That's cash. But what else? benefits, what else? Amenities, non-monetary benefits. The total composite, that y-axis was the total composite. So now we're going to get into this. Let's work this thing out. When we look at the real wage rate, the real wage rate is on the y-axis. That's the composite. Just know the supply and demand graph. On the x-axis is the quantity of labor for a given skill of labor. And there will be this much employment, O to QE. And this will be the compensation for that given skill of labor on the labor market. Now, in reality, there's multiple different labor markets, different kinds, different skill sets, and so forth. Now, let's look at this a little closer. The demand curve for labor is called the value marginal productivity curve. The value marginal productivity curve. And we're going to examine this in just a second here. And so now we're going to look at it from this way. The demand curve, again, is that value marginal productivity curve, which by definition is the marginal physical productivity times the price, what that person is producing. So value marginal productivity, by definition, is the marginal physical productivity times the price. And that is with a given level of capital. So capital is the constraint here. That's your tools that you're working with, so to speak. Now, okay, so this is going to establish the demand curve for labor, which we're going to get into by the end of today. And the first thing we're going to start with is the supply curve of labor. We're going to start with the supply curve of labor and determine the two questions. Number one, here it is, write this down. The relative elasticity of the labor supply curve. That's one question we're going to have to answer. The second question is, where does the labor supply curve sit in the XY space? So you've got a relative elasticity question and you've got a shift of the supply curve question. We're going to also do that with the demand curve as well. Let's start with the relative elasticity of the labor supply curve. Right? How responsive is the quantity of labor being supplied to the wage rate for this skill of labor? Now, to understand this, you have to understand there are two different effects. Number one, there's what's called the substitution effect. Substitution effect. And number two, the income effect. Substitution effect and the income effect with respect to the real wage. Now, the substitution effect is a short-run variable, always dominates in the short run. The income effect always dominates in the long run. Now, you might ask the question, how long are these runs? In labor economics, usually when we talk about substitution effect, we're talking about things that are like 5 years and less. That's usually considered short run in labor economics. When you start getting 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're definitely in the long run because you can change just about anything in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So the question is, how does the quantity of labor supply relate to the wage rate being offered? Now let's start with the substitution effect. When you think about substitution effect, when you're at work, you are not at leisure. There's a trade-off between leisure as a consumer good and all other consumer goods. There's a trade-off. You sacrifice leisure to go to work, but then you earn income. And then what are you going to do with your income? You're going to buy things that serve your needs. So you're trading off leisure to serving your needs versus everything else that could possibly serve your needs. That's what the choice being made by the worker on the margin is. Now notice the directions here. It says when the real wage rate goes up, all other things equal, the quantity of labor supply goes up, which means you've got that upward sloping spectrum. Conversely, when the real wage goes down, the quantity of labor supply goes down. This is this positive slope here. Now let me explain that to you. Let's say we start with an initial equilibrium wage of $10 an hour, and there's a QE amount of jobs at that wage being offered. Are you with me? You go to work and they're going to give you $10 an hour in purchasing power, you can buy things, and you're trading off what? The leisure I could have had by not going to work? Okay. Now let's say for some reason, tomorrow's your day off, and you were going to go to the zoo down in DC. And you're going to have lunch and have a picnic and look at the panda bear in leisure. Now let's say your boss calls you at nighttime. Says, I really need you to come in tomorrow. You might say, well, I really need to see the panda bear tomorrow. I'm going to have a picnic at the zoo. Yeah, but I really, really need you. Can you come in on your day off? And you say, well, how bad do you need me? Now, if your boss then tells you, I tell you what, if you come in tomorrow and you work those extra hours, I'm going to give you triple time. Tomorrow. Now, can you guess what employees will almost unanimously say? Hell yes, and how many hours can I work? I'll work a double shift, triple shift, I'll work through the clock, right? Now why? Because you're paying them more, right? See, guess what happened to the opportunity cost of leisure? It just went up. Why? Because if you decide, I'm not taking that offer, aren't you paying 3 times more of other potential goods? You're sacrificing that to do what? Go eat the lunch and look at the panda bear? So guess what most people will do? They say, I'll work, and then I'll go see the panda bear next week. It's a temporary thing, very short run, you've got to capitalize on that. So if they offer you double time, triple time, man, you're going to work as many hours as they'll willingly let you do. Yeah. I actually had to do that once in business. And I offered triple time. And everybody was fighting over who could work on their day off. Anyway, that's another story. Everybody wants to more quantity of labor. Now, what happens if we had the reverse? Let's say you're getting paid $10 an hour, and tomorrow's your day off, and your boss calls you and says, I need you to work tomorrow. And you say, how bad do you need me? He says, well, I tell you what, since you weren't going to make any money tomorrow anyway, I'm only going to give you $5 an hour tomorrow to work. Now, you might say, well, if I wasn't willing to work at $10 an hour tomorrow, why the hell do you think I would work for $5 an hour tomorrow? See, with that lower wage, what's the opportunity cost of leisure? Didn't it just go down? It's only going to cost you $5 potentially an hour to go see the panda bear. When you were willing to pay 10 to go see the panda bear, foregone leisure. So the quantity of labor supply will fall. Actually, in this case, probably 0. Okay, so that's the substitution effect. Always dominates in the short run. Usually 5 years and under, we always consider short run in labor economics, which is different from the income effect, which goes in the opposite direction of the substitution effect. This says when the real wage goes up, the quantity of labor supply goes down. And when the real wage goes down, the quantity of labor supply goes up. So you say, well, which one dominates at any slice of time? That's an empirical question. Workers make that decision, but we do know in a very short run, substitution always dominates. You get 5, 10, 15, 20 years of that, income effect always dominates. So what does that mean? It means, look, let's say that tripling of your pay, it's like when Henry Ford quadrupled real wages, you get paid more. And if it's perceived as a permanent shift, aren't you a richer person? Yeah, you're a richer person. And people that have more income, they're more wealthy, will consume more leisure. Ceteris paribus, people that are wealthy will consume more leisure. People that are poorer will consume less leisure. That's why you get that effect. So walk this through with me, okay? So if that $30 an hour is permanent, and you say, wow, it's not just this temporary thing I got to get now, whenever it's offered. Could be when they invented computers and your word processor, and all of a sudden, wow, this is great. And my pay's going way up. And it's going to stay that way for a long time. See, wealthier people will leave the labor market to consume more leisure and more income to consume that leisure. Now, so that actually would give you a backward bend to the labor supply curve if it oversets and overweighs the substitution effect. Now, let me give you some examples of this. You might say, now, what is the evidence for these? Here we go. This is the evidence of the income effect. When you look at the average work week, how much time people are actually working, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where all this data comes from, tells us in 1850, the average work week for a full-time employee was 66 hours a week. Are you with me? In 1998, they say a full-time average work week, full-time employee was 34.6 hours a week. Now, what do you know the difference between 1850 and 1998, that 150-year period? What happened to real wages? They exploded. What raised the real standard of living was what? Technology, capital, all this productivity. If you think about this, compared to people in 1850, you're earning about 20 times the real income per hour of work that your great ancestors made. So you're making 20 times more income for every hour you're at the job. That's not including inflation. I mean, this is adjusted for that. Do you work more than your great-great-grandparents? You work less. Because you're richer. And wealthier people can afford to pull out of the labor market, consume more leisure. So that income effect is dominating. Now, I only had one problem with this 1998 data. That's the official full-time average work week. But my guess is, if you look at what people are actually doing in 1998 on the job, they're not working the same amount that their great ancestors did. You go back to 1850 and look at people actually working. They're working in farms, they're working in factories, they're working in mines. They're actually working. Now, you look today and you say, go into an office and look at people work. Are they always working? They work at 34 hours a week. I bet you they're not working 10 hours a week. Why is that? They're probably on the computer, playing solitaire, maybe emailing, having chit-chat, right? What else? They're at the water cooler, talking about Desperate Housewives, who's going to win the Super Bowl, right? Some TV show. Getting in the betting pools and talking, chit-chat. Having coffee breaks and lunch breaks. You think your great ancestors had coffee breaks? Lunch breaks? They didn't do that. You went there and you worked. I mean, basically continuously, right? So the average work week has not just been cut in half. I'd probably argue it's probably been cut about 60, 70%, 80%, minimum. And the great reason for that is the real wages have gone up that much. And the great hero here is productivity. We can look at people, so people work less on average. Average retirement age. This is when people pull themselves out of the labor market at the end of their life. Now, in 1968, the average retirement age in America was 66 years of age. That was the average. 2017, it's 60 years. It was actually a little less. It was 59.6 or something. That's around 60. So the average retirement age has gone down. Are you with me? When you pull yourself out of the labor market, you're not earning income, but you're consuming leisure, aren't you? Richer people can afford to do what? Consume more leisure. Yeah. So during their working life, they're working a hell of a lot less and a hell of a lot easier. And when they get to the end of their working life, they end it much earlier so they can consume leisure. Now, you also know what else happens here. Over this period, life expectancy goes from about 65, 66 to almost 80. So you're going to be consuming 20 years of goods and services and a lot of leisure at the end of your life. Are you with me? Yeah. So it's dramatically reduced the retirement age. At the same time, life expectancy has expanded. Is because of productivity and real wages. Richer people can afford to stop working earlier during the work week. They can stop working earlier in their life, and they can consume at a high level of income for decades throughout their life. And when you look at the average retirement age, if you go back to the 1890s, early 1900s, the average retirement age was usually about a week before you died. Life expectancy was only like 50 years old. And can you guess why people worked until they just basically died? Poor people have to work, bottom line. And they would work till they dropped. At the very end of their life when they were too physically sick, couldn't do it. But you see now, that's all shifted, right? Because over your lifetime, even though you're working dramatically less hours, even though you're going to leave the labor market much earlier in life, you can accumulate a 401k, retirement account, it's going to sustain you at a high level of consumption at the end of your life for decades. There's one reason for all of that: productivity. Productivity and technology that created all that. Average starting full-time work, average age. BLS tells us in 1870, a full-time employee began work at age 13. 2017, they said it was 19 years. It was a little more than it was like 19.4. I just rounded it down. And I have some problem with this, so I'll explain why. Now, so most people used to go to work before they were even teenagers. It used to be called child labor. They worked on farms and factories and mines, very young. This was average full-time work, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Now, what happens is over the next century, as the real wages dramatically go up 20 to 1 in real terms, their parents work less, their parents will retire earlier, and one of the first things those parents will start doing is pulling their kids out of the job market and taking them out of the job market for longer and longer periods of time. Guess where those parents put those kids? School. There you go. So they're going to start heavy investment in their human capital. Education. The mind is the greatest tool. So the first thing that happened was in the 1870s, very few people ever went to much of any schooling, maybe 1 or 2 years, 3 years. But then it was, can you get through primary education, which was first grade through sixth grade. Then by the time my mother and father were born, then 8th grade was considered what was called high school. 8th grade's all you went to, and then you graduated. So they would then invest longer, get more years of making investments into your kids' future productivity. By the time my oldest brother was born, right after World War II, 12 years of school was primary education. And then they even started K through 12, and through another year in there. So now people are going to school more and more. Why? Because you're trying to invest in their future productivity, give them higher income, higher wages, and so forth. So here we go. So they're pulling themselves out of the labor market. They're doing it earlier in life, and they're pulling their kids out of the labor market to make more human capital investments that will only pay off over a longer term. By the time I was born, a lot of kids that were coming out of high school were starting to go to colleges. By the time my kids are born, a lot of kids going into colleges are now going into graduate school, graduate programs. More and more intense investment into your human capital. And why do parents do this? Well, because they love their kids. They want their kids to have a better life than they had. It's like my parents did that for me, I do that for my kids. And of course, there's only one thing that is responsible for all that. It's called increased productivity and higher income because of the real wages that went up. Now, last few points on those. Total lifetime hours worked, even though we live 30 years longer than we did a century earlier, declines 25%. So you start to go through this, you see the income effect is dominating over the long run. In the short run, the higher wage will get you to work more hours, not work harder, just work more quantity. But over the long run, as this persists, and those higher wages are real and they're persistent because of productivity, and you realize it's permanent, then people start changing their values towards leisure and other goods. So what reduced the work week was not government. It was technology, productivity, and higher real wages. What reduced the retirement age was not government. It was called productivity, technology, and higher wages. Income effect. What ended child labor, I cannot say this adamantly enough, was not government. What wiped out child labor was increased real wages based on productivity, technology, and the income effect. And this has been true everywhere in the world. There has been absolutely no exceptions anywhere in the world to the income effect. If you see a country's standard of living rising for 20, 30 years progressively, first thing they're doing is pulling their kids out, shortening their work week, retiring earlier, and putting their kids into schools. And then making massive investments into those kids' education. Sometimes to the point of overinvesting. Now, just as a piece of advice here, because I've been on both sides of this, as an employer, I would sometimes have people apply for positions in my businesses that had impeccable academic credentials. They'd have masters and so on, impeccable, beautiful grades, right? And I'd ask them, I'd say, okay, you're almost 30 years old. Do you have any job experience? Any real world practical experience? And I had dozens of people apply for senior positions with my company that had no job experience. None. And I said, well, you've got one part of the human capital, the academic, formal stuff, that's good, but don't you have any real world experience in any kind of job that I can know you can actually work in a workplace? And many of them didn't. And I threw their resume straight in the trash. I said, sorry, can't hire you. In life, you want to balance. It's equilibrium, it's balance. While we do this for our kids, we make massive investments. It's also maybe wise to get a little real world experience out there. To say it's not just this formal, abstract stuff, but it's actually practical stuff. That I have a former employer you can talk to. I can show you, I can work in a work environment that you really don't necessarily get in your classroom. You can't learn all human capital in a classroom. It's an important part of it, don't get me wrong. But it can't be everything. If you overinvest in something, it means you're underinvesting probably in something else. And so this is the income effect. It always dominates everywhere in the world, doesn't matter what the country is. And you know why it dominates? Especially on that child labor, do you know why? Because most parents love their kids. If you look at where there's child labor in the world, it's in poor countries. Poor people cannot afford to make the investments in their kids' long-term education. That's why they put them in the workplace. But once they start earning enough income, then they can then start substituting in formal education where it is needed, or advanced formal education as it progresses. I mean, when wealthy people can afford to do this. So whenever I hear students look at poor countries that have child labor, say poverty is always bad. Scarcity is why we have poverty. Questions how to help you get out of it. You need productivity, and that requires some education, some real world experience, some capital, some savings, and so forth to make your work count for more. Are you with me? Parents worldwide love their kids. They invest in their kids. Government gets almost no credit. Almost none. See you in the next one.